Simon Cowell, a name synonymous with music, television, and unapologetic honesty. For decades, he stood at the center of modern entertainment, discovering voices the world had never heard and turning ordinary dreamers into global sensations. From American Idol to The X Factor to Got Talent, his fingerprints are all over the soundtrack of a generation. Yet behind the sharp suit and sharper remarks lies a far deeper story. Not of arrogance, but of endurance. Not of cruelty, but of the bruises that shaped him. This is not just a tale of a ruthless television mogul. It's the human journey of a man who rose from invisibility to global power, stumbled through scandal and heartbreak, faced mortality twice, and emerged softer, wiser, and profoundly human. The Silent Childhood. Simon's beginnings were anything but glamorous. Born in London in 1959, he grew up in a household that looked polished from the outside but was quietly fractured inside. His father, Eric Cowell, was a strict music executive who valued discipline over affection. His mother, Julie Brett, a graceful ballet dancer, was loving but distant. Praise was rare, affection rarer. Years later, Simon admitted, "My father never said, 'I'm proud of you.' Not once." That silence carved deep into him, a hunger for approval that would one day fuel an empire. School offered no comfort either. He was restless, rebellious, and often in trouble. The young boy who wanted to be seen was constantly overlooked, branded as difficult and distracted. By the time he left school, armed with little more than determination, Simon carried with him a powerful vow. He would make the world notice him, no matter how long it took. From mailroom to nowhere, his first step into the entertainment world was hardly glamorous. Thanks to his father's connections, Simon landed a job in the mailroom at EME Music. Each morning, he delivered coffee to producers who barely noticed him, sorted fan mail for stars whose names would one day pale beside his own. "I was invisible in a world obsessed with the spotlight," he once said. The humiliation was crushing. He quit once, defeated, only to return months later, humbled but determined. The rejection that haunted his childhood now became fuel. Instead of chasing applause, he began studying the anatomy of fame itself, how stars were created, marketed, and forgotten. The boy who once sought affection had found a new obsession: control, failure, fire, and the birth of ambition. In the early 1980s, Simon took his first big gamble, launching his own label, Fanfare Records. At first, it glittered with promise. Pop hits like So Macho climbed charts, and Simon tasted success for the first time. But the industry is merciless. Trends changed, profits vanished, and within years his company collapsed. At barely 30, he was bankrupt, financially, emotionally, and spiritually. Returning home to live with his parents, he slept in the same room where childhood loneliness once echoed. "It nearly broke me," he later confessed, yet it was in those ashes that Simon Cowell was truly born. He began to see failure not as an ending, but as an education. Every loss taught him how to build something that couldn't be taken away again. The boy who had once been invisible was now preparing to make the world watch. Reinvention and ruthless clarity. By the 1990s, Simon returned to the music business with BMG. This time, he played by no one's rules but his own. Gone was the dream of chasing critics' approval. Now he wanted hits. Pure, unapologetic hits. He signed acts others laughed at. Boy bands like Westlife, duos like Robson and Jerome. Purists mocked him, but the charts didn't. His records sold millions. Behind the commercial shine, however, Simon was perfecting something else: his understanding of audiences. He realized fame wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. This revelation would soon change not just his career, but the very DNA of television. The making of a cultural revolution. In 2001, Simon stepped out from the boardroom and onto television screens with Pop Idol. Viewers were immediately divided. Was he brutally honest or simply cruel? The answer depended on whether you were the one being judged, but the public couldn't look away. His bluntness was refreshing in a world of empty praise. When American Idol premiered in 2002, it turned Simon from executive to icon. Millions tuned in, not just to hear singers perform, but to hear him. The raised eyebrow, the cutting remark, the moment of silence before a verdict all became legendary. He wasn't just judging talent, he was shaping pop culture itself. And with the X Factor and Got Talent, Simon built an empire that spanned continents, launching the careers of global stars from One Direction to Susan Boyle. But behind the glare of success, the cost was steep: power, pressure, and isolation. At his peak, Simon Cowell was hailed as the most powerful man in television. Yet, the higher he climbed, the lonelier he became. The long hours, the relentless schedules, the constant scrutiny, they all carved invisible wounds. Even in a room full of people, I often felt completely alone, he once admitted. His life was measured in ratings and contracts, not peace or presence. The boy who once craved love now lived surrounded by applause but starved of connection. His personal life, often tabloid fodder, reflected that imbalance: glamour without grounding, companionship without calm, scandal and redemption. In 2013, Simon faced a scandal that shattered his carefully built image. News broke that he was expecting a child with Lauren Silverman, the wife of a close friend. It was a story tailor-made for tabloids, and they devoured it. Overnight, Simon went from judge to judged. He later admitted, "It wasn't something I'm proud of." Yet, from that chaos came something extraordinary: his son, Eric. When Simon held him for the first time in 2014, something inside him shifted. My world suddenly wasn't about ratings or contracts. It was about him. Fatherhood became his quiet redemption. The man once known for harshness found joy in bedtime stories, laughter, and unconditional love. He still carried guilt, but for the first time, he also carried grace. Grief, loss, and reflection. Just as Simon began to rebuild his life, fate struck again. In 2015, he lost his mother, Julie. The woman whose approval he had silently sought all his life was gone. Years earlier, he had buried his father without ever hearing the words, "I'm proud of you." Now, both parents were gone, and Simon felt unanchored. "Losing my mom was the hardest thing I've ever gone through," he confessed. Grief humbled him. The man who once commanded empires retreated into silence, questioning what all the power had truly been for. It was the beginning of his transformation from mogul to mentor, from performer to philosopher. A father's legacy. By the mid-2020s, Simon Cowell had transformed once again, not into a mogul, but into a mentor and philanthropist. His business empire still thrived, but he no longer chased numbers. His days began with therapy for his spine, his evenings with stories for Eric. His fortune, estimated at over $600 million, no longer defined him. In interviews, he spoke of purpose, not profit. He announced that his wealth would go not to luxury, but to charity, funding healthcare and education for children in need. "I don't want Eric to inherit money," he said. "I want him to inherit values." The man behind the legend. Today, at 65, Simon Cowell is no longer the feared judge of primetime television. He's a survivor marked by every battle he's fought: emotional, physical, and moral. His posture is slower, his tone gentler, his humor softer. He speaks less about talent shows and more about gratitude. His face, lined with age and wisdom, tells a story no rating can measure. The story of a man who rose, fell, and learned to rise differently. Simon's greatest legacy may not be the stars he discovered or the empires he built, but the truth his life now teaches: that power fades, fame is fleeting, but love, humility, and second chances are eternal. Conclusion: the legacy of empathy. Simon Cowell's story is not one of perfection, it's one of perseverance. From the lonely boy in a silent home to the king of global television, from scandal to salvation, from broken bones to rebuilt purpose. His journey reminds us that success without humanity is hollow. Today, the man who once judged the world has learned to judge himself gently. He is living proof that the greatest victories come not from applause, but from awareness. That legacies aren't measured in ratings or riches, but in redemption. And as he sits beside his son, far from the stage lights, Simon Cowell's life whispers a truth we all need to remember. The greatest legacy is not empire, but empathy.